Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. It is 4 p.m., and I'll go ahead and get the study session meeting called to order. Today, we'll go ahead and get started with public comments. We don't have any, is that correct? We don't have any right now, so we'll go ahead and move to the next item, which is our study session items, and we'll get started with C1. Review and discuss the consent agenda items, and we'll go in the same orderly fashion as we normally do when the mayor is present. So I'll go ahead and start with Tina, and we'll work our way down, and then I'll hold my commentary until the end. So, Councilwoman Burton?
None.
Okay. Councilmember Jackson?
I'd requested that the consent agenda item J3 be moved to the regular agenda item section for public discussion and presentation by the city staff.
Okay, so J3 will be pulled from consent, and we'll go ahead and move that to L1. Is that correct, Whit?
Yes, sir, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, wonderful. Anything else, Councilmember Jackson? Okay. Councilmember Neal?
Nothing, thank you.
All righty. With that being concluded, we'll go ahead and move on to C2, receive a presentation from code enforcement and discuss an amendment to the Code of Ordinances related to parking regulations for oversized vehicles in residential areas.
Good afternoon, council members. Christina Ramhild, Code Enforcement Manager, and I am bringing back the oversized vehicle regulations at the request of Councilmember Roger Neal, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the objectives of this ordinance is to regulate oversized and commercial vehicles in residentially zoned areas, enforce similarly to our peer municipalities, reduce overcrowding of vehicles in residential streets, improve the livability of the residents in the neighborhood. Reduction of weight on residential streets will reduce damage to the streets in the future. A little bit of history from oversized vehicles. Back in 1997, we did have an oversized vehicle ordinance that provided that RVs must be stored in the rear of the property on an improved surface and be completely screened from view. Special vehicles were defined as motorhomes, campers, large trailers, or RVs. Currently owned special vehicles not able to be stored in the rear were grandfathered for 5 years, subject to an annual permit and established length limitations. In 1998, we amended Ordinance 2325 to remove screening requirements if special exception was granted by staff. In 1998, we amended the prior ordinances, allowed RVs that cannot fit on the side or rear of the property to stay in front. As long as the resident owns the vehicle, length limitations were removed. And then in 1998, in October of 1998, we amended prior ordinances, eliminated grandfathering provision, which legal counsel advised was not legal, as it discriminated against new residents, and that ordinance was passed. Currently, we do not have any ordinance that regulates parking of oversized vehicles on private property in a residentially zoned area. Our proposed ordinance is we propose a definition for vehicle, a definition for oversized vehicle, no parking storing of a vehicle in excess of 9 feet in width or 23 feet in length. Previously, I had 30 feet, but based on the research that was conducted, we reduced it to 23 feet. No standing, stopping, parking an oversized vehicle in a residential district. No parking, storing vehicle in a rear side yard unless concealed from the right-of-way by a permitted wall or fence, vegetation, or combination of above. And this is just some of the research that we conducted from the other cities. Addison has a requirement of 25 feet in length, 8 feet in width, 10 feet in height. Carrollton has 8 feet, 6 inches in width, or 40 feet in length. Colleyville has no more than weighing of 1.5 tons. Flower Mound has a restriction of 8.5 feet in width, 14 feet in height, 36 feet in length. Garland cannot exceed 16 feet in length or 9,000 gross weight total GWT. Irving has no more than 1.5 tons. Richardson has no more than 23 feet in length, 8 feet in width, 10 feet in height at any time. And I will take any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Since this was Councilmember Neal's item, I'll let him go ahead and get us started, and then we can resume from the left of the dais on my left to the right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you for the presentation. I requested this item as a result of receiving many emails and comments from residents about their concern for the excessive number and amount of boats, RVs, campers, and various recreational vehicles, along with various trailers and whatnot being parked in the yards. And I shared a few photographs with some fellow council people about it. And just trying to get some sort of an ordinance to get our arms around this. And I read through your initial red line of the ordinance. I'm generally agreeable with that. There was some confusion with some of the residents, including myself, using the terminology of just oversized vehicle ordinance. But it took a little more time to read the definitions of what that is. And in there, it seemed much more clarified as to boats, RVs, campers, and that sort of thing. So, so far, I kind of like what we've done here so far. My only concern might be at this point is the sizing efforts that we put there, the 23 feet in length and 9 feet. As I drove around the community, I found quite a few vehicles that were less than the 23 feet and are still somewhat of an eyesore to the community. So I don't know what the sense of the council is on addressing the sizing and whatnot. So I wanted to bring this forward and have a discussion with council. So, but otherwise, I sort of like what you put together here so far, and just would hope we can tighten it up a little bit and maybe put something forward as a regular ordinance. So I don't really have any particular questions, just mainly some comments. I kind of like to hear what my fellow council members want to convey on the matter.
Councilwoman Burton?
For one, I'm happy to see it come back. This doesn't address the parking issues. We do have ordinances for how the size and tonnage, I suppose, to be on streets.
So that would fall more under the police department's jurisdiction. So I don't really have the answer for that. I do have for private property, but not really for the
The
streets.
public. Okay, all right. I like it. I'd be supportive of it.
Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, I'm definitely in support of it. The 23 feet seems to be the minimum of all the cities and towns that have been reviewed. So I don't see a real necessity to reduce it beyond that. So we're still being the strictest of all these communities.
Councilmember Jackson?
So this proposal really is specific to oversized vehicles, right? So if we're looking at 23 feet in length and 9 feet in width, if I have a 21-foot bass boat with an 8-foot wide trailer, I can still park that in my driveway.
That's correct.
So is the goal here about the size of particular vehicles, and is that a safety thing, or is that aesthetics? Is it neighborhood, looks? Are we just trying to make the city look cleaner here, or is there a safety concern? Because in my mind, this doesn't necessarily address a whole lot of what the pictures that I've seen around the city and that I've seen myself. Trailers full of junk sitting in driveways, boats with torn covers and sitting water in the boats in driveways. This would not address any of that. I could put a 16-foot, 8-foot long, 8-foot wide trailer in my driveway, full of lawnmowers if I wanted to, if I had a landscaping company.
Yeah, and absolutely. And if it's something that we want to be a little bit more stringent on, if we want to add in some more restrictions by type, that's also something that we could put into place as well. If we think that the limitations of just the length and height are not enough,
Right.
we could also do it by type if you guys would like to go that route as
Right.
well.
I mean, as far as what's parked on the street is handled by current ordinance already.
Correct.
Right. So we're talking about driveways and what's visible from the street. And so I think if we went forward with this proposal alone, we're leaving a lot out and we're not accomplishing enough. So my recommendation would be to go back and include types of vehicles, so that this has a lot more effect.
Okay.
So I do have some thoughts to share. And I mean, and I think we all know this, we have an over-congestion issue that exists. And so, whether it's you're parking something in your driveway that that now takes up your driveway and your other vehicles are in the street, or vice versa, you have something on the street and right? So if we have the ability to take steps forward to try and identify certain vehicles that maybe should be parked at a place that's designated for those types of vehicles, I think that goes a long way in trying to address the overcongestion issue that we have. So I'm definitely supportive of it. And I think to Councilmember Jackson's point, I agree. I think we can take another step forward. And I had brought up a future agenda item for us to talk about vehicles that carry junk and other things on their vehicles, and then they're parked not on the street but in their personal driveway. And it can be a bit of an eyesore for anybody who lives in that neighborhood, and I've gotten some complaints about that. So I don't know what makes most operational sense. I think there might be some efficiency in terms of legal costs if there's some level of coordination between those two, especially now that it's been brought up here by another member of council. But I certainly would be supportive of moving forward with this specific item, and then also moving forward with an additional component of addressing what it is that people are putting on their vehicles that might be an eyesore. And so however our legal counsel can help us define that and put language to that, I'd be very supportive of.
Okay.
And any other commentary from anybody on the council?
Yes, go ahead, David.
Thank you. Yeah, when I was making my commentary, I was thinking in the concept of actual vehicles, RV vehicles, motorized aspects, not so much trailers. So I agree that having something separate that addresses trailers and their content would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Garland's limit is 16 feet, as I think you presented, not 23. So they're quite shorter. Just wanted to mention that. But yeah, I think we're sort of trying to go after a little bit cleaner community here in general. And I do like the comments from council members about the language being a little more specific. And for example, like jet skis, you can fit jet skis on an 8 or 10 foot, maybe 12 foot trailer and still park it. So I think the language could really help us clarify what we're trying to do here. The last sort of thing that I'd like to add and comment is, so that residents don't get too freaked out here, is that I'd like to advocate for at least a 1-year time period to allow these residents who have the RVs and whatnot, to give them some time to relocate those vehicles or put up a fence to hide them or something like that. So I'd like there to be some rather 6 months, year, 2 years, I'm not sure what the council's feeling is, but at least some time period for them to address the issue. That's the only comments I have. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. To that point, I believe Richardson did do away with boats, RVs, and campers and driveways, and they did that with a 3-year initiative. They gave residents a lot of warning, continued to educate and communicate with the community about this impending ordinance. And so, and to echo Councilman Neal's, comments, that just makes sense, to do something like that, and length of time, pretty flexible about.
Okay.
But the ultimate goal is to clean up our city.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other commentary? Okay. Any questions? Are you clear on the direction?
No, I have my direction. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Alrighty, so next we've got C3, receive an update from the mayor and council members regarding board liaison information from outside organizations and other meetings attended. Councilwoman Burton.
I attended Gateway to the Globe this last weekend. I hope everybody had a chance to enjoy that. Most of you know that I'm on the Civic League as well, and we have been actually interviewing and visiting places that service Farmers Branch. So PD Place, for the residents that don't have insurance, it's an amazing place that you can go. We also have one that is another nonprofit that serves our abused children. And I will be asking for one of the future agenda items for Chief McCoy to give us some information about that one.
Councilmember Reed.
The only thing for me was Gateway to the Globe as well. It was a phenomenal experience. kudos to everyone involved in the planning and execution of that event. I've heard great feedback on that, so I just wanted to extend that, my appreciation out to staff and everyone who was a part of that, and thank you to all the attendees that went there and all the performers and basically everyone who participated, because it turned out to be a fantastic event.
Councilmember Jackson?
No updates, thank you.
Councilmember Neal?
Nothing, thank you.
I do have one update to share. Well, I also attended Gateway to the Globe, and it was, again, for another year, phenomenal event. Wanted to give a little bit of an update on my conference that I went to National League of Cities. And first, I kind of just wanted to explain a little bit about what this conference was, the fundamental goal that you try to achieve when going to National League of Cities, and it's the conference that happens every year in Washington, D.C., is it is an opportunity to form a coalition with other elected officials from across the country to collaborate on maybe common issues that we are or have experienced and how we might have addressed them elsewhere. And it's a really great opportunity because we recognize that while we may have great ideas within the walls of our city, there's a whole world out there of other resources, and it's, I think, important for us to travel and take part of these opportunities to reach out and talk to somebody else, and it is just fascinating. I'll talk a little bit about some of the unique relationships that I've built while there. But I also learned, this was a sort of an interesting tidbit, we call ourselves here in Farmers Branch council members. Other cities refer to them as aldermen, which I thought was an interesting term, or commissioners. And then there was another term, and I couldn't find my notes about it, but it was another term. So it just opened my eyes to the way that, depending on the history of a specific jurisdiction, they call each other different things. Some of the cities that I had the opportunity to meet with was Alpine, Texas, people from McClendon, Chisholm, Texas, Mesquite, DeSoto, San Antonio, Denton, North Richland Hills, Kaufman, Balch Springs, Duncanville, Coral Springs, Florida, Terrell, Texas, Glen Heights, Texas, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Austin, and Mission, Texas, and several others who I probably didn't collect business cards for or might have misplaced them in the flurry of things. But it was great to collaborate with everybody. And interestingly enough, some of the issues that, even for me personally, that I've experienced, and kind of the dichotomy of my district, of one side being kind of the older part of the city, and then the other side being a newer part of the city. Other representatives across the country have a very similar experience. It was nice to hear from them and have them in my Rolodex to figure out how they're addressing the needs of both of their areas while also not picking sides or favoring one over another. And then somebody in Denton said that their district was exactly like the eastern part of my district, and we'll be meeting soon to collaborate and talk about how they're addressing some of the redevelopment initiatives that they're focused on. So just such a really interesting group, and there was some educational pieces that I'll talk about here, but really the focal point of going there was networking, and they provided a lot of really neat networking opportunities, especially for the people in Texas. They had a lot of groups and networking events specifically for Texas people so that we could meet one another, since we're basically neighbors. Some of the sessions that I had attended included America's Housing Comeback, partnerships and strategies for economic prosperity, and that sort of addressed how different municipalities are partnering with nonprofit organizations or for-profit organizations or other government organizations to try and address the big housing issue. And what I've learned is that this housing issue hasn't been an issue that has only existed for a year or two. It has been an issue that has existed even pre-COVID. but it has become more prevalent because of COVID and after we've started to see the valuations of properties increase so significantly, then it's become very hard to find adequate housing for everybody. And so there was a lot of discussions about that missing middle housing and how to partner with different organizations to try and achieve a good outcome for the residents. We also talked about maintaining momentum. The next session was called Maintaining Momentum in Economic and Workforce Development, and that was really focused on partnering with different businesses in the community, creating what they called an ecosystem, which I learned is a kind of an industry term, but creating an ecosystem, which essentially means creating resources around the businesses from our city and from other organizations to ensure that the businesses, that we recruit businesses, and then when they come here, that they remain successful, because usually businesses may only survive for about 3 to 5 years. So how do you get them through that 3 to 5 year period to ensure longevity and success, because that eventually turns into the success of the city. Then the other one was a closer look at new rules for PFAS, lead and copper. So that's the lead and copper rule revision. And so they talked a little bit about an expert from, actually the lady who runs the EPA, the director of the EPA was there to talk about the phased approach that they were doing to try and get people into compliance. And so they've basically finished it. And I've got this fantastic chart, if anybody would like to see it, that walks you through the roadmap of where they started back maybe 10 years ago when they first started this, and how it's evolved to today, and how they're working with different cities across the world or across the nation to help them finance and fund some of the big projects that they have to do. Luckily for us, hopefully we don't have as big of a bill than others, but one of the things that they did mention was the resources available to any city to, one, identify where they are deficient and what they need to do to be compliant, and two, the other resource that they offered was, like I said, low interest rate financing options. So those were some of the things that were discussed, and there were several other sessions, but those were sort of the top three that stuck with me. Let's see. I talked about kind of the common issue being housing. Then the last day we had what's called Hill Day, and Hill Day is a really neat opportunity where they help you schedule meetings with different representatives that represent your city. And so I had the amazing opportunity to sit down with Senator Cornyn, Senator Cruz, Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne, Congresswoman Julie Johnson, and Mark Veazey was not available, but we did get an opportunity to meet with Mark Veazey's legislative director to share a little bit about what's going on in our city, some of the concerns that I've heard from my residents and other residents across the city and other council members as I sit here on the dais, just so that they're keeping a pulse on what it is that's going on, and really that is probably one of the things that maybe I haven't been the best at in the last few years, but I think moving forward it's something I'd like to ensure we continue to do, because it's great to have a relationship with our state representatives, but having the support of the federal government, the state government, our county really will help us with a lot of funding that we need for projects that are absolutely necessary for our community. And so that was a really eye-opening experience, and I made a post about it and had all my pictures with all of them. So if you'd like to see it, feel free to go to my Facebook page. But that is the conclusion of what I did at National League of Cities in DC. So thank you very much. And with that, that brings us to our last study session item, which is C4, review and discuss future agenda items. Councilwoman Bennett Burton.
I told you this was coming. The life cycle of the buildings, but I'd like it to include the solar panels on top of the buildings, so we know what we're looking at and when we're looking at it. And I'd like to go ahead and add to the map and everything that they're working on for the drinking water, the sewage.
I have nothing at this time.
Go ahead.
No items at this time.
Okay. Councilmember Neal.
Nothing for now. I have a few of mine coming up next meeting, so thank you.
And I only have one. I know that as part of getting new legal representation last year, we had talked about doing some sort of annual review of our legal services, just to ensure that we're touching base with our attorneys and ensuring that any adjustments or great things that they're doing, we want to make sure that they either start, stop, or continue doing. But so I wanted to make sure that we have on our agenda to at some point review legal services, probably not in the near future, but once we've completed maybe a year of working with them and having an opportunity to touch base with them. And that's all I have. All righty, so then that will take us into executive session. So let me go ahead and read us into that. The City Council will convene into closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.087 to discuss economic incentives for Farmers Branch Project 2025.005. And the City Council will convene into closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.072 to discuss the real property located at 1349 through 1399 Valley View Lane. And the City Council will convene into closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071 subsection 2 to seek legal advice from the city attorney regarding the implications of pending Texas House and Senate bills on the city's current law enforcement policies and procedures and public outreach regarding the same. And then the City Council will convene into closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.071 subsection 2 of the Texas Government Code to receive a legal update from the city attorney regarding campaigning and municipal elections. And lastly, the City Council will convene into closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071 subsection 2 to seek legal advice from the city attorney regarding the powers of the City Council under Section 2.06 of the City Charter. And we'll go ahead and start that now, and then we'll come back maybe a little bit before the regular meeting, and then if there's any items left, we'll finish the regular meeting, and then we will convene again in executive session if needed. But that's it. Thank you.